when anyone leaves their body, there's always somebody left behind.
Yeah.
And usually they're, depending on their relationship with the one who left, they're deeply affected in many, many different ways. And so that's what we're going to be hearing about tonight. Our dear friend, Madhavendra Puri dasi. 6-7 months ago, she was a guest on the podcast. It was a wonderful episode.
Yeah.
And then about 1 month ago now, probably, she became to the point where it was time for her to leave the body. And she did, and it was a great loss, to the planet, really, to those close to her. Certainly a great loss and big impact on us.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
the wonder of it is that because she had dedicated I don't know how many years, but many, many years of her life to learning all these truths about life and developing her spiritual awareness and growing spiritually and developing more and more her relationship with her spiritual master and the Lord. Her transition was not a big drama for her. You see, it was a whole multiple year preparation for the inevitable. And
She had,
she was well prepared, and it was a wonderful transition.
She was in a way fortunate to be. She was diagnosed with ALS 9 years ago, which is amazing that she managed to stay around that long. But yeah, so she knew that it was coming, and she had such a bright smile, and it's just a light from the inside when we had her on our podcast. So anyone who wants to watch that's episode number 29. So you can maybe,
Not very long ago, someone who had watched the podcast told me that even though she had ALS and all the physical trauma that goes with that, she was glowing. That's what this person said. She was glowing.
Yeah, exactly.
You just repeated it. It was obvious.
Yeah.
So there was much more going on than just a physical frame that had a disease.
Totally. Wow.
And it's available to everyone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's going to be a very interesting conversation with Allan, who was her husband, and Shalie, who was her daughter, is her husband, is her daughter. I mean, it's not was, but
Madhavendra still exists.
Yeah, she's still there. And so on. So we'll let them do the talking and we'll do the listening.
I like that. Once in a while. But I just wanted to say, if anyone is listening on Facebook, we are going to not live stream the full episode on Facebook. So if you do like to keep on listening, you can go to breakingtrail.life/death. breakingtrail.life/death, where we stream this episode. So with that, I'm going to just turn off the Facebook stream. And if one thing that I wanted to say as an introduction as well is that all of the things that we're discussing now might not be what everyone wants to hear or what is comfortable to hear, but it is what you need to hear. And we're going to dare to go a little bit deeper into the topic of death and not just scratch the surface. So this is going to be a deep dive. So get ready and buckle up. And I'm going to bring Shalie and Allan in.
I bow.
Namaste, Allan.
Namaste, Balakia. Haribol.
Namaste, Shalie. Haribol. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah. So
we can all hear and see each other. That's a good thing. Thank you for doing this, Shalie and Allan. I know it's early morning for you guys, and I know it's a little bit on austerity to be here, but and
I'm surprisingly awake, which is, rare.
at this time.
Yeah.
It's my
That's-
my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's our pleasure that you agreed to come as
Totally.
our guest.
Totally.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So, Ruben, you're good at starting these things up.
Yeah. I was wanting to. There's a lot of questions that I have. There's a lot of questions that actually people have sent us in as well. I'm wondering about, but maybe you could just tell us briefly about yourself, Shalie and Allan, who you are and what your background is, and how, where you guys are living, just so that we get to know you a little bit.
Well,
Allan?
Shalie knew Madhavendra longer than I, so maybe she should start.
That's true.
Okay. Well, I don't know. For those who did know my mother, she was quite a, I don't know, flamboyant character. And we grew up in Australia, and we came into contact with meditation when I was really young, and she'd also traveled a lot in Indonesia, so she'd been accustomed to different Eastern philosophy, and so she was looking for something. Anyway, it was a wonderful childhood. Very she took me everywhere. She used to take me to like all kinds of countries, and it was fun and exhausting. She had a lot of energy, my mum, and so possibly why she left this world a little sooner than most, because she wore herself out. She was she had a lot going on. She ran a clothing business. She was a really amazing person. I have to be honest, as a child, she wasn't a great example, but through following this process, she completely did a 180 and became an amazing person. In fact, it was, sorry?
No, what was that? I remember she said something about the hippie. She was kind of
Yeah.
into the hippie lifestyle, or
Well, I won't go into too much detail because she was pretty private about it, but
Oh, I see.
she definitely, it was like two different lives she had in this one life. So when I was younger, she wasn't grounded. So but basically when she came into this process, she did a 180, and I don't know, she became much better at, in some ways. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the point here, but she started to discipline me when I was like 15. I was like, you're a bit late, because but it was at that point, that I was more of an adult. But as a child, she didn't discipline me much because she was too busy, living her life. But as an adult, she started to, change. And I really appreciate now, not so much when I was 15, who she became, and I was incredibly close to her because we had just been the two of us up until she met Allan, and we did everything together. And so this loss is quite great for me. I was doing okay last week, but this week someone said it would come in waves, but I miss her greatly, and but I know she's in a better place, so I have to rest my heart in that. Anyway, she ended up in Canada, and then I followed her here, and now
yeah. And then Allan, you came into the picture. How did that? What was the...
Yeah, so I grew up in Canada. I was born in Ottawa, and I was living in Toronto. Actually, when I met Madhavendra, I was living in London, Ontario, which is where. So I went back to school when I was 46 to become a lawyer, and after having various careers and endeavors in the art world and things of that nature. And I came back to Canada. I was married and went through a separation and came back to Canada and decided to go to law school. So when I met Madhavendra, I had literally just finished, or was in my last month, writing my last exams of third-year law in Canada here.
Mhm.
And we just ran into each other and hit it off. And so she came into my life when I was qualifying to be a lawyer. So she and I spent some time together, and then she said, I'm going to go back to Australia. She said, I'm living in a house there. I've had a house on the beach for many years, and Shalie, my daughter, lives there. And I'm going to go back and see her and things of that nature. And then she came back into Canada. If you remember in her podcasts with you, she talked about how she came back in the fall that year, and she said to me, "It's
Cold as
cold."
it gets.
I watched it yesterday
Uh,
to refamiliarize myself with what she said in there. And it's true, she had no idea, much experience with, and no idea how cold it could get here in Canada. It was an extremely cold year. And I had my own sort of history of seeking spiritual knowledge and understanding, but I had kind of put it aside when I went to law school and was going through a separation. And so then she went back to Australia and literally settled her business affairs. She had her clothing line, and she was selling clothing and making a living doing that. But told me she was kind of ready to step away from that, and left Shalie alone. I think Shalie was, I guess, in her early 20s at that point, and living in the house and having her own life. I didn't know Shalie at the time. And Madhavendra came and moved to Canada, just sort of pulled up her roots and joined me here. And it was my first year of working in the legal profession.
Mhm.
At the time, I didn't know much about her spiritual background, except that I understood that she was interested in that. But I remember looking at I had a whole sort of library of books on shelves in my house where I was going to school. I'd unpacked everything there. And I was going to have a garage sale and sell everything to come back and live in Toronto, from a house there to maybe a much smaller place. I had a whole lifetime of things, and there was maybe 4 or 5 shelves of books on spiritual topics. And I remember we stood there, and I had the Gita, a book called the Gita, not by Bhaktivedanta Swami, but I said to her, she had picked it up and looked at it and put it back on the shelf. And then I said, should I keep any of these books? And she looked at the shelf and looked around, took a long pause and said, no, I wouldn't keep any of them. And so she said, none of them have any real value to you. I said, okay. I mean, I just accepted her on face value. She was just so authentic and seemed so knowledgeable. And I gave them away at the garage sale. Somebody said, how much do you want for these books? And I thought about what she said about there's no value to them. So I just said, take the box if you're interested. And so I kind of came into her life, and she came into my life. We were both in our 40s, and we're 1 year apart. She was 74 this year when she left her body. She actually, her birthday is coming up. She'd be 75 this coming week. So. And she changed my life. We can talk about that now, but that's sort of a little introduction as to how I met her.
Wow. And yeah, how is this last? I mean, she left her body those 2 weeks ago. Can you maybe briefly tell us about how that has changed your life? Like, how are things now, and how has it been for you guys? That's a big one, I understand, but
For myself, I have to be honest. Nothing has really changed. We've just completely, embraced. Well, she was responsible for a lot of things, running the center here, and I've tried to pick up the pieces, and that's kept me really busy. I have to be honest. I've kind of wanted to curl up in a ball and you know, or, wallow in my misery, if that's what you would call it.
Because she's been running the whole meditation center in Toronto that she started as well. Yeah, and she's.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of the people who got in contact with her. She's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here and I'm following this process and I'm finding out who I am and having the benefit of that thanks to her, the retreat that I came to. So, yeah.
So I'm just trying to, we have a retreat coming up at the end of the month, and we have all these programs, and she was really active. So I think it's probably for the best that I have all these things to do. So just to keep me from doing what I just said, curling up in a ball and, I don't know, self-pity, but I'm coping. It's, I often am reminded of her because she's like, especially around the house, I'll hear her voice in my mind telling me, don't do that. I'll be like, okay. Anyway, what do you think, Allan?
So I'm 75, I'll be 76, and I've never experienced such devastating emotional response to anybody in my life leaving. And I have good days and bad days. Things are a little better now. And so the part that for me, that it's just amazing. You can know what's going to happen. You hear it happening to others. I've had loss, but I've never had this sort of like literally waves of grief and distress. And so, but what I learned from Madhavendra was that you're not your body. She taught me the philosophy she had learned. She introduced me to the teachers she had. Balakia was instrumental in all of our lives here in Canada. She asked him if he would be kind enough to join us, and he did. And he came once, and that was nice. And she said, "Let's do it again," and he was sure, okay, and fit us into his schedule at the time. It was about 1998 that I met Balakia with Madhavendra. I remember exactly. We were in Yosemite. It was Labor Day weekend. We had a retreat there. 175 people showed up. It was my first really significant retreat. We had a few small ones with 10, 15, 20 people, 10, 15 people up here in Canada. And I followed, and I sort of watched my wife change and develop and deepen her process. You can never tell how much somebody else believes or is connected to what they're doing. From my personal experience, you can. I think Balki has said it in the podcast, the change has to come, or maybe he said it recently, change has to come inside. You can't tell from the outside what's really happening. And I watched her engage in the process of teaching people this. She wanted to chant with people locally. And there was no podcast or internet back then like this. And so she started teaching classes at our house. She put out brochures and had people come to the house, and we had enough people. We started having a program Sunday night, and she never took her eye off the ball. And so she kept me steady as my mind took me in many different directions, and many people steady. She was sort of a solid rock to go to when you had something to ask about how you were doing or how others were doing. So this grief that I feel is tempered by the fact that I know she's gone to a better place, as Shalie says. She's gone back. And my understanding and belief and love for her is that she's gone back to God, and she's in a much better place than we are here in this material world. And part of that comes from just the years of watching her so focused on her spiritual life and following this process seriously and internalizing it. And so the grief that I have is about losing that companionship, losing her intelligence about what to do. And I feel this fear that I won't make the right decisions. I'm very dedicated to this process. In fact, watching her go through this and leave her body has emboldened me to step it up and become more dedicated, more connected to the process that I've learned through her, and which I totally embrace. So,
and that's something that I thought I would ask as well. Like, what the good things that have come out of this have been. I mean,
well, so intellectually, I understand that she left her body and she's in a better place, and emotionally, and I just feel this sort of overwhelming sense of loss. And I realized, I think, I watched the podcast yesterday just because I wanted to remember what she said. And there was something I've been trying to think of for the last week or so that she kept saying to me. She said that, and she said it yesterday because I couldn't remember. She said she said self-pity is the most nauseating form of anger. And so I guess I'm kind of without realizing it, my self-pity, and she talked about being in boxes. If you remember, just people go into the ALS box, or they go into the cancer box,
the ALS room and the
cancer room. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I don't want to happen. I do not want to end up in the self-pity room or the grief room. I want to celebrate her life. So that's what I'm working on. Even as we speak, I'm feeling emotional just talking about her, but that's what I'm going to do. And so to do that, I focus I put my mind on the meditation that she taught me and taught thousands of people, because that's where I'm going to get my help. I can't do it myself. I need that help. So, and with people like Balakia and others, very fine friends of ours that have followed this process, Shalie and Kaivalya, Shalie's daughter, my granddaughter, and Alex, Shalie's husband, we all sort of really have put our shoulders together, our shoulders to the wheel, and we're working forward. And yes, it's great that Shalie and I, assisting to the best I can, are continuing Madhavendra's work. She'd be so pleased. Also,
I know.
I'm happy we're doing that.
So if we go back a few years, because I asked Madhavendra the same question. How was your reaction when she was diagnosed with ALS? Maybe you could start, Shalie. How?
I was freaked. Well, I didn't know about it at first. I had to do some research, but she told us, because she had started to lose balance when she was walking, and she got these, I mean, this is a side point, but she got these shoes that kind of have an arch in them, because she thought maybe that would help with her walking, but it actually was worse. And then I remember one day we were in a parking lot and a trolley got away from her in the wind, and she tried to catch it and she fell. And you could see the signs of her illness were starting to become present. But I have to be honest, I really don't think the ALS is what took her life in the end, like her what killed her body. It was she also had COPD, and she had managed to, which was honestly, I'm in awe of her and Balakia, because they're both very good at controlling their tongues, and she managed to give up all wheat, dairy, sugar, all the things that we tend to enjoy, and was on like a complete, like strict diet for over a year. She was on the Candida diet, and I think through that she managed to heal her gut, and she stopped the progression of the ALS. It had already, disabled her, so she couldn't walk properly and do a few things. but she had managed to stop its progression. So in the end, I think the lungs weren't able to get oxygen to the heart. So she started to not be able to breathe, and that just led to kind of organ failure. But yeah, when we first heard it was not an easy transition. Anyway, it was actually, I think, God's arrangement, because we all moved in together into this house, and she got to be with my daughter, her granddaughter, and all these wonderful things came of it. So her illness provided a perfect gateway to spiritual life. Like, it was very conducive. So despite her having to suffer in that way physically, although she was never in pain, she was, it was perfect and beautiful. So,
Wow.
Allan?
Yeah, it's, I mean, I think it's said, or she said many times, you get so many breaths in life, and really we don't change much. We think we do, we doctors and the medical profession, and that. She was so accepting that she was close to the end of her life this year, but like Shalie said, the typical ALS patient lives a year, maybe 2 years at the very outside. But we were told at the time of the testing that she had a slow developing version, and that people can live. Even the doctor mentioned 10 years when my wife and I asked the specialist. And we were at Sunnybrook, which is in Canada is the top ALS. It just happened to be in Toronto. And so the first reaction was, this is going to be quick. I mean, her physical life is going to end quickly. But my wife was a researcher and a very disciplined, unbelievably disciplined person. She would get up at the same time every morning and would be doing her meditation for exactly the same time. And then at 7 o'clock, she'd get up and she'd go and so I couldn't like shower between 7 and 7:10 and certain places where we lived where it was smaller. And because that was on her schedule. So that discipline carried her through this illness. She searched out everything she could about ALS and found a number of people that had lived 15, 20 years that had written books, different ages, different backgrounds, and talked about all the different approaches they had taken. And most of them said they were still alive and didn't know why, because they weren't sure what actually contributed to their staying in their physical bodies. And she just was a trooper. She just worked through it. And as her physical health declined, she adapted. So the last month or two before she left her body, or maybe 3 months, she started having general physical health issues like nausea, lack of appetite, things like that. And it would change. So we started searching for answers. And it turned out the ALS probably, as Shalie said, didn't actually, it was contributing, I'm sure, because her physical, the extent of her movement had been reduced quite a bit. So we started searching out, and the ALS people said that they thought she should retest. If she asked her if she wanted to retest to see if it could, quote, challenge the diagnosis. And she wouldn't do that. I watched it. It was a painful process. And then as other things just started ceasing to function, she said to me many times, she said, I burned my chi out in my youth. And I wasn't there. Shalie made reference to it, and we didn't talk a lot about it, but she lived a very strong life. She lived a very full, active, hippie-ish, life before she started the meditation process. And she often said, yeah, I'll probably go first because I pretty well, burned my chi, used up my whatever period of time my body's going to last. And so it's always sad to know that you're going to eventually be alone, one way or the other, her or me. She's kept saying, don't leave me alone here. I don't know what I'll do without you, sort of thing. Sorry, I got a little meandering. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
That's a good answer for the question. It just made me think about something that I've heard various teachers speak about, and she was an example of. She did all she could. She gave her 100% in trying to fight this disease and trying to stay in her body. She didn't give 120% though, by skipping her spiritual practice and just going all in to try to keep her body alive forever, which is an impossibility. But she knew how to find the balance between over endeavoring to keep her material body alive and just not caring about it. So she did care, she did her best, but ultimately she had faith in the Supreme that there was a plan for her and she can only do her best and the rest is up to someone else. So that's something that just...
I personally felt like she was like a perfect yogi in her practice because of her dedication to her spiritual practice and her control of her senses. And knowing her as a child, she was not regulated and not, able to control her senses. So I was just so impressed by that. I am still so impressed by that. And to be honest, and Balakia knows this, I've been quite rebellious in my life, especially when it comes to my diet. And I keep hearing her voice, don't eat that. And the funny thing is because my daughter got to be in her association for such a lot, while she was here, I now have a mini mum. Like a
Shalie, don't eat that.
And she says, don't eat that. And then like last night, she's like, it was 11 o'clock and we were lying on the couch and she's like, you have to go to bed. You have to get up early. And I'm like, oh my God, please stop. But it's a blessing. And
maybe that's what Madhavendra thought. She knew that she'd be leaving, so she'd leave her. Should influence Kavalia to be the voice of Madhavendra.
It does feel like that.
Oh, it's funny.
And that brings up a very important point, a little bit off the subject, but kids learn what you teach them. She was such an example that Kaivalya just followed that. It's not like it came from nowhere. She had that perfect, role model. And it was her grandma. And, I don't know about you guys, but I was really, really influenced by my grandmother. And if we set the right example for the children, they will become like that. And if we set a bad example, they'll become like that too. That's a little bit off the subject, but not really. And she was such an example for so many people. Just like you guys are saying, I knew her very well. Many people that knew her always say the same thing. She was so one-pointed, so focused, so determined, so, able to just do what she had to do. And not vacillating and I don't know. She just was like a straight arrow,
It just makes me think about maybe you could say, Shalie, like what do you think was the key that you that knew her so well? What made her be able to be like that? What was the secret to success?
My experience, Shalie was around when Madhavendra was first introduced to chanting, and because it was their neighbors, and Shalie was young. In fact, she mentioned how Shalie had started acting calmer, I guess. I don't know if the exact word, but she noticed a difference. Well, whatever they're doing, it must be is good because it's helping Shalie in many ways. I think my wife got such pleasure out of the actual meditation. I think because she talked about that to people. She made that point almost all the time when she was talking to people that were learning or starting to introducing this process, is that she'd go to a chant and she'd say, "Wow, that felt good." And so I just want more of that. And so I think, you're not going to do something that is not fun or it seems like an austerity where you're giving up. Your mind tells you you're giving up all this pleasure that you're missing by, denying yourself certain things. So therefore, sort of like fasting, fasting or eating sensibly to get to the same result. One is a strong sort of denial of something, and therefore you may go overboard when you come off of it. The other one is have a sort of slow and steady. She got a lot of pleasure out of the meditation, and she got a huge amount of pleasure out of introducing people to chanting, and would not take her eye off the ball. We've talked about this, but she was just that, and she was like that with me. Like I would be somebody who, I'm an individual, I'm a separate living person, and I would have different desires and wants, and they may not be consistent with what she thought was going to be helpful in my spiritual practice. And so she was relentless about, let's stay the course. And it was, I'm sure, because she felt that was in our best interest, in my best interest. And she was right. I mean, if you lose sort of, your mind tells you, let's do this, let's do that, and you get lazy with your practice, then you start to notice life doesn't seem to shine as much. But you don't realize that, sort of getting dull incrementally. And when we go to a retreat and we spend a lot of time chanting and listening to philosophy and hanging with like-minded people, you come out of it feeling fantastic. And so that's, I think, was the answer to your question. Is I think that's what kept her steady, was the life experience was the answer to the question. She got tremendous pleasure out of it, both doing it and introducing people to it, bringing them together, doing it together.
She made it real. It was not just a game for her. Like, it was real experience.
It wasn't just philosophy.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
A dry philosophy doesn't satisfy the soul. Yeah. Thank you. Shalie,
But Shalie, you would know that from the very beginning, she also arranged her life so she had good association with other people that were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And she changed things up. She moved different places. She made it so she was always in association with, like you said, like-minded people who are practicing this, seriously practicing this. And that had a major impact as well. That's one of the things that we learn is association is the most important thing in spiritual life. And she understood that, whether she heard it directly or just intuitively understood it or was automatically attracted to those people, that association, regardless of how it happened, it happened. And that just changes everything. And then when she came to Toronto, she became that association that attracted other people to her. She provided that association for the other people, like it had been provided for her.
Yeah.
And it just continued to the end. And that's very important.
Yeah, she really I mean, I think Allan touched on it, but this weather up here is not exactly her cup of tea or mine, to be frank. And but once she got everything situated and was getting a taste for, sharing this process with others and learning and growing, she couldn't leave. She loved everybody here, and it was very fulfilling for her spiritually to stay despite the weather. And we've got a really wonderful group of people that have rallied together to like-minded and to share this process with others. So we're very fortunate.
Yeah.
If you could if you could turn back time, is there anything that you would have said or done differently, or anything that you'd like to have said to Madhavendra? Or
No, not me.
So part of the teachings and what we strive for, it's not always attainable, is forgiveness, right? And you can't really ask for forgiveness unless you're prepared to give or be forgiving. And so the night before she left her body, she was in pretty bad shape. In fact, we had rooms next to each other, and I was concerned that she might be leaving her body. So I crept out a few times to hear if I could hear her. I didn't want to disturb her if she was, still there, and so I didn't want to really open the door and turn the light on, which would defeat the whole purpose. But so I begged her to forgive me. I never got to say it. I begged her to forgive me for all my many offenses. Sorry. Anyway, I begged her to forgive me in my mind, and they say that if you can't say it to the person directly, you... And then things got busy, and then that morning she left her body, so... Sorry.
that's okay.
I maybe you shouldn't have asked me. Anyway, that's one thing I know she would have, because we would have our moments, and they would blow over. So that's the answer to your question.
I mean, yeah.
I guess, just to share that I, as a child, I felt quite, I don't know, angry at her for some of the things that happened before she came into contact with this process. And while we had lived together, we had actually I had finally been able to get over that anger I was harboring for her. And that was a huge weight off my shoulders, like to know that she, I had forgiven her and she'd forgiven me for all the offenses that perhaps had taken place as a child. And I know a lot of us don't have the perfect childhood. And, I can say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great before she came into contact with this process. And so at the end of her life, I was actually I was holding her when she left her body. And I, like Allan, have a hard time, dealing with the grief. But I was able to whisper in her ear that I loved her, and that she would, she could go. And it was very, I was so grateful for that, to have had that opportunity to be there at the moment she left her body. And my daughter was also there, and so was Allan and Alex, my husband. And it was, honestly, as sad as it is, it was the most amazing experience to have actually been there. And she wasn't in a hospital, and they didn't, it was just as she wanted it, perfectly arranged, and it was quick. And I didn't have any regrets. I was very grateful towards the end of her life that I was able to take care of her. I'm so grateful for that. And I just, I look forward to seeing her again one day when I leave this body.
Can you possibly pinpoint what it is that is giving you that comfort and shelter, and that gave you that shelter and comfort as she was leaving her body. I mean, we have a lot of people who haven't, maybe are completely new to this philosophy and new to the yoga lifestyle, and maybe you could.
Well, she had prepared me for it. We discussed it a lot before she left her body. She had some very specific ideas of how she wanted to leave her body, and I don't know. I just kicked into gear because she was in a precarious position when she was about to leave her body, and I managed to grab her and pull her away, into a comfortable position. But when somebody is leaving their body, I don't think they have the strength. So it's not easy. I'm not that strong. But I managed to get her in a position where she was okay. And I didn't think, I just did it. It was perfect. I think. I mean, we always look back on it and think, well, it would have been nice if she was lying in bed and she was comfortable, but things don't always work out the way you planned. But as far as, that moment, it worked out amazingly. And I will treasure that moment, that last moment I got to be with her in this life. And yeah. So
Do you have anything to say to that, Allan? To think the same.
My wife walked towards leaving her body, towards what we call death, with a clear-eyed focus. She was not at any point in time in a state of terror or anxiety about it. And she wrote to her friend who really introduced her to her spiritual teacher way back when I'm not even sure, in the 70s, maybe possibly. She wrote. He spoke on a dedication, and we had a program on Zoom with about 70 households of people from all over the world, and a group of people here at our house, and we had a big chant. And he spoke, and he said he read a message he'd received from her where she said, "I'm longing to go back to God," and so she walked like I said, clear-eyed to leaving her body with. I said, "Do you want me to do? What would you like us to do?" We had power of attorney on personal care if you lost the ability to make decisions, and we have, give each other that sort of ability to make those decisions. And she was clear that she was getting really close to the end. It's hard to talk about. In fact, I kept thinking, all right, well, they're going to fix this little problem and things will go back to normal, because she had been through that. She almost died in the year we moved out of Toronto after the diagnosis. She literally came, I'm saying, a hair away from leaving her body. We had a retreat here, and there was probably 30, 40 people staying here. It was Christmas 2014, and we'd moved in here to get out of the city. And Shalie and all the, serious students were, around and helping and at her beck and call. And she lay there literally gray, and, her weight was down. And my mother left her body that week. I had to fly up to Ottawa for a funeral, and it was a difficult time, and she came out of it. So she was, I guess, a survivor physically. She survived some close calls, but she was clear-eyed right to the end. So I don't think I would have done much differently. Yes, we have our regrets, but at the end of the day, she succeeded in her goal. And so at the end of the day, that's what mattered, not whether you took this little path or that little path if you get to your goal. You're trying to get up a mountain and you get stuck in the wrong path, it matters. But if you go up different paths, but you get to the top and you attain your goal, then nobody thinks about or talks about you took a little extra path or a different path.
And I guess you could see that you're wanting to be with her is a bit more difficult now, but you're wanting to be with her is of lesser importance than she being in a place of love and comfort and right now. That.
Yeah, it's just selfish, really. When people, I mean, you have the emotional reaction, which is involuntary. I think my experience is I can't stop it. But intellectually, I understand that it's just I'm dwelling on my own loss. It's me. I'm really the mourning that's going on here is for me, not for her. That's the lesson that I'm coming at it with, and I'm trying to defeat it. And I use my meditation to do that. So I've improved my my regulation, my physical, and I get up earlier and do my meditation when it's quieter. I've improved and focus more on it. I mean, I'm just taking it more seriously. Because why? Because that's what, I'm 75, 76. I'm going to leave my body. It's inevitable. We're all going to leave our bodies. So the question is, how do you want to go? And so, yes, I'd like to be back with my wife. But, if I'm not my body, I've probably had many wives and husbands and children and parents and that. So she brought me to the meditation process, and we have a bond and a connection, which I believe will help us, reunite. But really, the goal is to individually, go back to the spiritual world and get off this lousy planet. this material world is look at what's going on. It's just like, it's just chaos, right? Just a horrible place to be. Why, so if you can come back to go back to the spiritual world and not revisit in this world, then sign me up. I want that. I want to get on that flight. Take me to the departure lounge, and I'll buy a ticket. I'll do what it takes.
Madhavendra had a talk a while ago, and I always wanted to ask her about that, because she spoke about it in our entry with her, the talk that she had for the international group of people who had ALS. Do you know what I'm referring to, Allan?
Yeah, I do. I was actually there when she was speaking to them.
Oh.
I was out of sight, but I was.
Can you tell us about it?
I was there for part of it. Well, I came and went while she was talking to them, but I listened to some of it. I heard her explaining that she was not her body. I think that happened after your podcast, right? And,
yeah. She said she was going to do it, and then she gave her inspiration for a quote from the Bhagavad Gita that she could read. I think she said she.
So I don't recall being there when that was happening, because she had a regular. I think almost weekly, she had some group that had asked her to speak to them about meditation, and the first thing you learn in meditation is that you're not your body, that you're a spirit soul inside the body. And so that's the very first thing and that's, I think, what the discussion was in our podcast. And so I don't think I was there when it started, because just wandering around, I sort of heard him talking. But she told me after that, people got back there, particularly the people that organized it. Were very pleased that she spoke to them, and she got personal comments that they really appreciated hearing that. But I can't say much more than that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, she said to me about that the lady who ran the whole group, they became friends, and they would talk often about, spiritual life. I should try to, keep in touch with, or reach out to her. I've got to have a look and see if I can find her contact. But because I still get calls on Mum's phone, and I have to tell them that she's left. But yeah, it's hard. She touched a lot of people.
Yeah.
I get calls, like I've had 3 calls this week from different, I got a call from a bank. They want someone to come and speak with them. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I wish Mum was here. She was so good at it. But I'm going to have to muster up the courage and read up and try to do it justice, and hope, I can also be effective in the way that she was. So
The bank wanted her to speak about meditation at the...
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she got all kinds of calls. We're going to a school, like a college next month, and the bank, and she did all kinds of things. I think once she spoke to like over, was it 100 or 300 bank employees at TD? It was a huge group. Maybe it wasn't 300, but it was a lot on Zoom. So one good thing about COVID was, we all switched to online. It was much easier to reach a bigger audience in that regard.
Yeah.
Shalie, you can do it, mate. You just do it.
I know.
That potency will be there. Don't worry about that. You just speak from your heart and you'll be fine. Okay. That's what Madhavendra did. She just spoke from her heart. She didn't rehearse it or anything. She just spoke from the heart. And if you do the same, the result will be there.
Yeah. I was we have a weekly, meditation on Zoom every Friday night. And I went through all of her old videos and I wrote notes of all the different, points she made. And she said it beautifully. Like, it was really like smooth. And I printed it out, and I'm like doing it, and I'm like trying to read it, and I'm like, this is not working. I can't refer to these notes because so you're right. And I realized at that point I had to just speak from my heart, because that's when it comes naturally. So I'm going to try that.
Just like you're doing now.
Yeah, I know.
Just talk.
Yeah.
You know the subject, you know the purpose, you know who you're trying to please, you just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it before. I just have to, like you said.
Thank you so much, Shalie and Allan. I think we're going to have a little kirtan in the end now. And there's so much more that I'd like to ask him and talk about, but that's, I guess, a good feeling to leave with.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. People can hear things that they can see is real. I mean, this is, like I said, it's just what we're talking about. You're just presenting your heartfelt, feelings, truths, experience, and that affects us. Yeah. So, thanks for agreeing to come on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Madhavendra knows.
And thank you, Balakia, for the years you've come here twice a year for 2-3 weeks at a time. The students and people would come from all over the world when you were coming here, and you just thank you. And Madhavendra was so grateful.
People from Norway, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. We like our Norwegian friends.
Yeah, that's how it works, isn't it?
It is.
So, I guess we better have a little kirtan.
Yeah, let's do it.
Madhavendra would not like it if we didn't have a kirtan.
That's true. Thank you.
Thank you. So the mantra is always the same for our podcast. Gauranga Haribo. Gauranga. Everybody. Haribol.
Haribo. Haribo.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Okay, so there we go.
Thank
That's
you.
the secret right there. Madhavendra knew the secret. I got no sound.
Oh, I think Slava needs to turn
Ruben,
on.
are you?
You hear us now,
Okay.
Malakia? Yeah.
Yeah, I can now.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been taught from the beginning of this Bhakti Yoga process that take shelter in the holy names. And as I know, as Allan knows, as Shalie knows, Madhavendra did that. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there you go. She heard what she was supposed to do, she did it, and she was successful in life.
Thank you,
So,
Malakia.
yeah, thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you, Shalie and Allan. Thank you so much. I know it hasn't been long since you left, and I know I've spoken to both of you before of it, and I know that there's a lot of feelings, and I'm just very, very happy that you've been able to come here and share from your heart, really, because that's what it's all about, and that's what matters. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Balakia.
Greatly
Yes.
appreciated.
Thank you both.
So, until next
I guess.
time.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Namaste, Haribol.
Namaste.
Thank you, everyone.
Haribol.
So, thank you all very, very much for joining. I'm very, very touched myself, and I just, thank you. If you have any thoughts, comments, anything that you'd like to ask about or us to bring up in the future podcasts, then please write us. You can find our contacts at breakingtrail.life. That's our website. And we just released an episode about There Is Hope. We just released it before the podcast. So if you want to listen to that one, I definitely recommend it. A podcast about that there is really no hope if we think that we're the body, but there is eternal hope for us if we come to know and we come to realize our true identity as a spirit soul, not the body, but an eternal particle of life. So thank you again. And we have different possibilities you can contribute with. All of that available is on our website. You can join our email list. And thank you. Namaste. And have a wonderful day. And I hope to see you soon again.